It can give you new information. It can develop the character in specific ways. There are all kinds of different things that could be achieved. Hi everyone, welcome back. Today we are talking about scenes, specifically having a goal for a scene and why every scene you write should have a goal. Now I have an entire workshop on writing great scenes. It is my Great Scenes Mega Course workshop, and I cannot encourage you enough to take a look at it because it is very thorough and it addresses pretty much every little subject about scenes that you'd want to think about and helps you write them. It comes with great class notes, and as you know me, I don't want to just teach you theory, I want you to go put it into practice. So it has a very wonderful workbook for you as well that will help you take what you learn and then immediately start answering the questions and outlining what you need to do to write each of your scenes. So I cannot encourage you enough to take a look at it. I will link it below. Scenes, scene goals. A scene is often, I wouldn't say always, but it's often and most of the time, it's a story in miniature form. So it has its own beginning, its own middle, its own end, its own climax, its own denouement. A scene has all of these things, which means that when you're writing a story, if you have the grand story, the beginning, middle, end, climax, denouement, and within that, you have all of these scenes that each have that as well. And when you're trying to design a story, what you want to do, if you've watched any of my videos, you know I'm about tension and release. Your job is to create an emotional and mental experience for your readers, which means making them feel tense, and then relieving some of that tension, because you don't always want somebody completely tense. So when, like if you might be familiar with the sort of the curve of a story, like, okay, plot, beginning, build to the climax, denouement. But really it's this up and down thing, because you're taking the reader or the viewer from tense to less tense, tense to not so tense. But each of the scenes needs to do that in a way that it's connected to each other, building to that climax. So that means that when you string those scenes together, they are building to a climax. So each scene has its own tension, its own release, its own climax. But as a whole, there's this overarching pressure of the story that's building up to the climax itself. That being said, you have these mini climaxes for each scene, and those mini climaxes should be varied. They should not all be the same. You want variety, but they also need to comment on one another, and they need to comment on the overarching story. So that means that when you're creating miniature tensions, you're still slowly evolving and building the overarching tension. I know that can sound intimidating, because you're like, oh gosh, I thought I just had to write events in a story, but now you're telling me, Barb, that I have to create a growing sense of tension, but I also have to have little tensions, and those little tensions should have variety in them. And that's true. It should be all of those things, which is why the Great Scenes Mega Workshop is a mega workshop, because there's a lot to talk about. But this means, to achieve this, that you need to establish first your story. You need to establish your overarching story. I get into this in the Plot Essentials workshop. Plot Essentials workshop is going to help you get a handle on what is the overarching movement of a story and how do you write that. But once you do that, then you'll know, okay, here's my overarching story. Now I can start to work toward what should the goal of each of these scenes be. And this will vary depending on a number of things, including your character arc. If you design a character arc, that's going to really help you design that overarching plot movement, because you will have designed the movement that you want your character to go on internally, which is going to influence what you do externally in the story. So designing your character arc is going to help you come up with that overarching plot movement. Then when you start to say, oh, there's this scene that's going to do, and oh, this is going to happen in it, and you start to have those scenes, you're going to more easily know the purpose of those scenes, because you're going to have a more solid handle on the things you have to achieve to get your character from point A to point B, because you'll have designed the arc. So the arc really coincides in many ways with that build to the climax denouement. And once you have that, you can start to go, gosh, there are these things I need to make sure happen. And that will help you decide okay, what does this scene need to do? Now, as I mentioned, you really want to make sure that as you do this and you think about your scenes, you want variety for the goals of those scenes. And I'm not going to delve here into all of the possible goals for a scene or the possible functions of a scene. I get into that in the workshop. But a scene can have all kinds of things. It can give you new information. It can develop the character in specific ways. There are all kinds of different things that could be achieved, that it's like, this is what I want the reader to know or to feel by the end of this. That's my goal. My goal is to move the reader along in the story. So my goals have to be connected to the information and the experience I want my reader to have. So those are the things that you'll be thinking about. But there's a variety of kinds of scenes, types of scenes. What does the scene achieve? And when you're writing your scenes, you really want to think about that as you think about the scene goal. The scene goal shouldn't always be the same. Not every scene needs to be jaw-dropping new information. Give me a variety of the kinds of things you want me to achieve as a reader or a viewer. You're taking me on kind of a roller coaster. And a roller coaster is not fun if all I do is go up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Yes, I'm building tension and releasing it as I go downhill. But this is kind of boring. You really want, variety. So you want to make sure that you design that variety into your scenes. This means also thinking about both the surface action and the underaction of the story and how the goals pertain to both. If you've taken Character Arc Mastery or watched any of my videos, you likely know stories have a surface story, that's the outside action, has the understory, that's the character development. The character development pushes the surface action along. That's why you design a character arc. You design a character arc so that you get a skeleton of how that internal growth is going to push the external events along. But you want to think about that in terms of the goal of your scene. What's the goal of my scene for the external events? What's the goal of my scene for the internal events? And take both of those on for each scene. The last thing I want to say, I feel like I'm throwing so much information about you about scene goals, but take the workshop because it'll really help you. And then the worksheets and whatnot will really make you go, okay, how do I put that into practice? Because I know sometimes, you hear theory and it's like, great, that was so interesting. Oh, what a nugget. That was great. But then you're like, now I have to actually take all of this and put it into practice. And that can be difficult. And that's why I'm always making worksheets for everything that I create as a course or a workshops, because I know that. And I know that having those actionable questions and steps is critical. But last thing I want to say is think of each scene in light of the one that came before it and the one that it leads the reader on to. So you're always saying to yourself, why this scene? Why do I need to do this scene in the first place? Why here? Why does this scene need to follow that scene and precede that scene? And it's a lot more complicated than just saying, well, chronologically, this is the next thing to have happen. Not a good reason. Because you could flash back, you could do this or that, you might have two things happening at once. And even if it is chronologically, you don't get to show me everything. This much happened in your story for your character to go from point A to point B. You are choosing the things, what you're saying, part of your job as the author is to collect and say, what are the scenes that need to be shown to demonstrate that change to my reader or my viewer? So you're being very strategic. Why did this scene matter so much that you wrote it into your story? And why did it come in this order? Make sure you answer those things. I feel like I've thrown so much information at you, but I hope it was helpful. Take a look at this workshop. I love the Great Scenes Mega Course workshop, and it's fun too because you learn how to analyze scenes in that. So I really walk you through how do you analyze a scene, and we spend a big lesson analyzing a scene together. It's really fun, and it's a very important skill because the books that I like are not going to necessarily be the books that you like or the books that someone else likes. So you need to become an independent and person who can analyze for yourself, and this workshop will really help you do that. And then you can go to the books that you love and say, I love that scene. How did that work? Why did this scene work so well? Break it down for yourself, take those lessons for yourself, and then go put them into practice in your own writing. So you'll learn all that in the workshop. Take a look at it. I will link it below. If this video was helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe. I thank you so much for watching, and I hope you are having a wonderful day.